Hello and welcome to a seance of raising plants from the dead. It's not really what's gonna happen here though. Also, I think in seance you just communicate with the dead. I'm not very well versed with seances, clearly. Today I wanted to talk about bringing plants from the brink of death, aka recovering plants after terrible transport. I have two examples today, and when I say I have two examples, I really mean I'm going to show you a bunch of plants, but I have grouped them in two sections, if that makes sense. And the reason for that is because they come from two different sellers. One of them is a seller that I like to purchase from, and I will show you plants from two orders that did not have the best time in transit. And the other one is a seller that I tried out, I got a bit of a taste, and it was not very pleasant. It was quite bitter. Before we start with the plants, let's hear from the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. If you want to learn new skills and explore your creativity, Skillshare is a great place for you. It is an online learning community with thousands of classes and amazing teachers that can help you with that. A class I enjoyed a lot this month is The Art of the Story, Creating Visual Narratives by Debbie Millman. In this class, Debbie teaches how to combine language with artistic elements to create a deeply moving visual narrative. It is sort of a play where you can experiment how certain materials, colors, and found objects can augment and enhance your story. Another class I liked this month, and I think you will too, is Plant Photography. Take Better Photos at Home for Instagram by Tabitha Park. I have to admit, I always struggle when I take photos of my plants that I like to share with you, because what I see in front of myself doesn't always necessarily match up with what my camera captures. In this class, you can learn the best way to capture an aspect of your plant that you would like to convey through your photograph. A great thing about Skillshare is that you can learn whenever and wherever you want, which comes in very handy, especially if you have a busy schedule. It is very simple to pause the videos and then continue them whenever you have time again. There are also no ads, so you can learn without any interruptions. Since Skillshare is the sponsor of this video, first 1,000 of my subscribers that click the link in the description or in the pinned comment will get a 1-month free trial so you can start exploring your creativity today. Now let's get back to the video. And now, without further ado, I will show you the plants. First, we have this sexy to be Anthurium waterburyanum. And this is one leaf that survived the transit. All of the rest died. And he is a bit crispy here. Anthuriums are not particularly fond of transit. Sometimes they will do really well and sometimes they won't. And in my experience, that typically will depend on the general health of the plant. When you send a plant like Anthurium waterburyanum, they do need to be somewhat hydrated. This plant was completely and utterly dehydrated, and all of the leaves were very, very pliable, which is a fancy way to say they were floppy AF. It did not love that. Upon further investigation, I discovered that entire root system was gone. It was in pure moss, and the moss was bone dry. The driest moss I have ever seen, drier than when you get dehydrated moss. So it wasn't great. I did remove the dry moss, and with that, all the dead roots, which were all of them, and I was left with 3 or 4 pretty floppy leaves. Needless to say, those didn't make it. Except of this one. This one is the only one that made it, and we had a bit of a struggle rooting this plant. Now this, as you can see, this is a bit of a spoiler, so there is more to this, you will see. There is a happy ending, I promise. I tried to root this plant in moss, but it simply was not rooting fast enough. So because this plant has a bit of chunk there, a bit of stem, I decided to go with something that I never done before, and that is stick it in the distilled water. Distilled being the key. Very quickly, and I do mean very quickly, the leaves started to hydrate and it started to produce new roots. Unfortunately, not all of the leaves made it, only this made it, and I think very quickly he will be on the way out. We will be sad, we will be thankful for this service, but he will not be missed because we have a new leaf. This is the new leaf that grew here in my care, and it took quite some time, and you can see, this is why I love this plant. If I turn it, you will see that shine on the leaf that it has. It's a velvety leaf, but you can see how gorgeous that is in light. And I do think we potentially have a thumbnail there. It is quite a nice Anthurium, and I'm very happy that he was able to push out this new leaf. Now, at that time, I actually did not write anything to the seller. I did not inform the seller for whatever reason. I think the rest of the plants arrived fine, and I was somewhat confident that I can rescue this one, especially because it had a nice stump there. And you can see also we have the roots on the bottom. So this plant recovered very, very nicely. In fact, all of the plants except one in this video did recover very nicely. The next plant is on its way to recovery. It's taking some time. It looked like it will arrive there, but then it decided maybe I don't want to recover. I'm not sure. It is Philodendron luxurians. And I will ask you to sit down in a chair, in a sofa, on the toilet seat. Please don't watch this on the toilet seat, but wherever you're watching, if there is a place where you can sit, do it. And I'm simply saying this because the plant is still not in a great condition, so I don't want you to be shocked. This is not a very luxurious Philodendron luxurians. As you can see, we still have a bit of crispage there, and it's not looking so hot. There are several issues with this plant. You will see that there is some discoloration there on the leaf that I'm trying not to touch. Some of the leaves do look better, like this one. He doesn't look terrible. This is not entirely miserable. This is the first new leaf that grew, and this plant was staying with my friend. So this is entirely miserable. And then the newest leaf that grew in my home on the shelf in the back is this one. Now, it is not fully open, but if we do peek a bit, we can see that this boy is fine. He is going to be fine, and I do think that this plant finally decided to live, which is good. We appreciate that. Philodendron luxurians is not very famous for being a good shipper. In fact, it's quite infamous. So when this plant arrived, it pretty much looked like a... You know when you buy a lettuce and you think you're going to turn your life around, and then you leave it in the fridge and a week later it looks the way it looks? Well, that's how this plant looked. So it wasn't really nice. And I assume that what this plant actually needs is higher humidity. This plant spent a couple of weeks in an enclosure because I thought it only needed a higher humidity to recover, and that seemed to be the case. The leaves started to firm up again, they were starting to look much better, and all was well. Because I share this plant with my friend, and I think all of the plants in this video I do share with my friend. I told her, you know, it's fine, now the plant is stable. You can move it into a grow tent next to a humidifier, because once again, I thought this plant wanted humidity. And then that's where these issues started to happen. And lo and behold, this plant, it turns out, does not want stupid amounts of humidity like some people suggest. Instead, it seems that what this plant really prefers is bright light and somewhat moderate humidity. And when I say moderate, I really mean 60 to 70, which I understand may not be moderate for many people, but in the grow tent, it is well over 80. Now, I will hold on to this plant for quite some time, I think. I don't think my friend really wants it back. She maybe got slightly traumatized because of this plant, which is understandable, but I will continue to care for this plant, so I will keep you updated how it does. But I think it is starting to look up. It even rooted, because this is a crawler, or it appears to be a crawler, it rooted into the substrate, so I think things are starting to look up for this. It's kind of like Anastasia, and this is the phase where she still did not meet her grandmother and she still thinks she's an orphan. So that's the stage where we are in, but soon she will meet grandmama and it will all be well, which would make me the Russian grandmother. Do I like that analogy? Yeah, I don't think I would mind being Russian royalty, and I do feel quite old inside and out. Let's move on. The next two plants arrived from the same seller in the same box. One of them arrived okay-ish, the second one did not. But there is a reason to why I'm showing you these two plants. First of them is Philodendron Splendid. This is only part of Philodendron Splendid. This plant broke in the box, and this is one part of the plant, and the second part of the plant is with my friend. As you can see, there is some yellowage there, which is okay. I had to root this Philodendron Splendid, but there is a new leaf here, and this leaf just grew recently. It opened, and this is not a top cutting. This is just, well, actually it was supposed to be the top, but the top also broke off. So this is kinda new growth, and it is looking wonderful. The back of the leaf also has this brown goldenish hue, and you can see this rooted quite nicely. And I'm happy about that because I do love the way this philodendron looks. The second leaf, the leaf from the base, looks like it went through a shredder. And I know that's not how this plant was sent, and it was nicely packaged. The box looked okay, so I have no idea what happened. I think maybe even gnomes were inside the box. So I sent the photo to the seller, and I was offered a replacement plant. Now, I did not take the replacement plant. I said no, I don't think it's necessary because I do think this plant will make it, and I don't think that damages like that are necessarily seller's responsibility, especially since this seller packs very carefully. I have experience with the seller, and the packaging is top notch. The second plant, this is what I did ask a refund for, and you will see why. This is Philodendron Snowdrift, and sure drifted away almost into death. This is the new leaf of this plant, and the older leaves do not look... Will you stop falling out? And the older leaves do not look so hot, but that new leaf is absolutely stunning. This plant was sent with 6 or 7 leaves, and they were quite nice, moderately sized, but unfortunately the plant was completely rotten, and the reason for that is because the pot was packed with moss and the moss was wet. When I unpotted this plant, I had enough moss for 2 pots of the same size. I really don't think people are best with their usage of sphagnum moss. You need to keep it fluffy, you need to keep it airy, ventilate that stuff. The moss, keep it, whatever. This plant is still on its way to root. Unfortunately, we did lose a couple of leaves in the process, or 3 leaves in the process, but honestly, I was expecting that. I did not have much faith that I would be able to root the entire top with 6 or 7 leaves. What I should have done, looking back, is probably cut it into 2 plants, which would be much easier to root, but there was some stem rot and I didn't want to risk doing that, so I did what I did. It's okay, the plant is clearly going to survive, it is going to recover, but I did ask for a refund because this plant rotted within 5 days or 6 days in the box. I don't think that's really my fault, and I don't think that's due to shipping. It was very obvious that the plant was wet, the moss was too packed, so unfortunately I cannot take any responsibility for that, as I had 0 choices there. And the seller was very nice, it did receive a refund. Again, I'm not going to mention any sellers in this video. I think that's for some other time or never. All in all, it was a good experience. And now we're going to transition into the unholy mess, which is my other German shipment, and we will call it the shipment of variegated plants. I do apologize for a different framing. My camera may or may not have decided to fall down. It's fine, we caught it mid-air, but it's only Monday. It's too early for whatever is happening there. We're gonna talk about this plant a bit later. Can we call it a plant? Let's vote down below. All of these plants arrived in the same box. All of them arrived within 4 days, obviously since it's one box, so they had to arrive together, Miro. And all of them had rotten roots. So they do have quite a lot in common. Not many good things in common. Not any good thing in common. Let's start with the first one, and that is Philodendron Florida Beauty. This is the leaf that the plant was shipped with. It was a 1 node, 1 leaf cutting. Based on this variegation, you would think it would not be a highly variegated plant, but you are wrong. The variegation in the stem is not really visible because it is an older woody stem. Let's just get that out of the way, but let's just check out the new leaves that this plant grew. This is the first one, I think that's a better coloration. My camera did wash them out a bit. This is the second one, and you can see the yellow and green variegation. And then in the first one, it does go more towards creamy white, but it does stay quite yellow. So when this philodendron arrived, despite it losing quite a few roots, I was not really that worried because I do have experience with Philodendron Florida Ghost, and I did not give it any special attention. In fact, I cleaned off the rot, I put it in semi-hydro and on top of my shelf there in the back, and it is doing well. It did great. Very easy plant to recover in my opinion. Now, to be fair, it did not lose all the roots, which I'm grateful for, so there was a bit of root left. Some of the other plants I was not so sure about because, first of all, they are very small. Second, they lost significant portion of the roots, and one of them looked like garbage material. So let's move on to the other plants. Once again, after a bit of adjustment, you can see this is Philodendron domesticum variegated. This is the OG leaf. He's not looking so sexy. You know, he had a hard life. Okay, let's give him that. This second leaf here, it also arrived with the plant, and then it produced this completely yellow leaf, which I was not a fan of, to be honest, but then we got a nicely variegated leaf, and then now it's again yellow, and I think the next one that we're about to get is going to be variegated. As you can see, this is a tiny plant, and it more than doubled in size, so you can really understand how small this plant was and why I was concerned when it arrived with all the roots rotten. Luckily, there was a bit of stem there, so it was able to push out roots from one of the upper nodes. And I can see here that it also is pushing out aerial roots right now. So I do think this guy is going to be fine in terms of rootage, but in terms of variegation, we might have some issues. It seems to get into that pattern of producing one nicely variegated leaf and then the next one fully yellow or fully white. And it seems that once they get in this pattern that they kind of do this, you know, you get one very nicely variegated and one that has zero chlorophyll. It abandoned the building. We might need to cut this back in the future, but clearly now there is just not enough plant material to confidently do that. I am sure that some people would try. I'm not going to. I'm going to let this plant grow out, and if it so happens that we have some fully yellow leaves, that's fine. It doesn't seem that they have a big lifespan, but we will see. That philodendron had to spend close to a month in my propagation box. Once again, I took it out of the pot. I was very pleasantly surprised by absolutely no healthy roots. It was amazing. I potted it in a mix with cocoa coir and perlite, and I put some moss on top to encourage new root growth, and I put it in propagation box. I only watered it once, put it in the box, occasionally ventilated, and you know, after several weeks it did start to look up, which is great. And now you can see the plant is stable in terms of roots, in terms of variegation. We do not know what is happening there. What I do know is that I have to change the battery, so excusez-moi, pardon my French. The next plant was the second biggest in that shipment, and well, I can only say that is no longer the truth. Isn't it lovely? I'm just joking, this is only one part of it. There is new growth. Right there, I don't know if you can see, there is new growth. We're going to be gentle with it. This plant was cut into 14 different parts, I think. These are the parts that started to push out new leaves. This is Philodendron Glorious. Ironic, isn't it? This was a large plant with quite a few leaves. It was missing the top, but I knew that. They took the top off to continue to propagate it. But I was very happy to get a plant with so many leaves. Unfortunately, none of those made it. They started to turn yellow very quickly. Most of them were yellow in the box because, once again, the plant arrived with absolutely no roots. Alive. There were many dead roots, but I don't think we can count those. So what did I do? I took cuttings of this plant. I wasn't going to attempt to root 4 or 5 leaves because there was no top cutting, and some of those had already started to yellow and they look a bit damaged. I just decided to cut them into single 1-note cuttings and to try to root those. And I managed. I rooted all except one, and the one that I didn't root was the part that had old roots. I simply don't think there was enough space there. Nothing was there left. I think that part was completely exhausted. The rest of them rooted. I think 7 are staying with me and 7 are with my friend. What I did, I put them in moist sphagnum moss, very fluffy, but moist sphagnum moss in IKEA Ziploc bag, and it must be IKEA. I'm just joking, you can just put it in any Ziploc bag, and they did really, really well. They rooted very quickly, and I potted them in, again, cocoa peat and perlite with a top layer of moss. The next plant was a gift. I wanted to purchase this plant, but the seller told me they didn't have it. I was somewhat pleasantly surprised when I received it as a gift, but also I was quite sad because the plant was very small. Not that I'm ungrateful, but I was just very sad that they sent such a small plant that wasn't ready for transit and it looked like it was going to die. I was 100% this plant was not going to make it, 100%, and I wasn't even mad about it because, again, it was an extra. It is a little Philodendron Splendid. You can just see how gorgeous those leaves are. This is the latest leaf this plant grew, and this is the one it grew before that. Now, it did have 3 small leaves, and this is one of those. And that damage, that happened during the shipping. It was a rotten leaf, so I cut that part off. And it had 2 more leaves that looked pretty much like this one, so you can just use your imagination and multiply this, but smaller. So it didn't look very good. It looked dehydrated, plus the edges looked rotten, as if it was packaged when the leaves were wet, which I do suspect happened with the rest of them. As you can see, this plant is in full recovery. It produced roots. It also lost all the roots. I really don't know how this plant survived. I also put it in the mix of cocoa peat, perlite ceramis, put some moss on top, went into my propagation box for a month, and it made it. The last alive plant from that shipment is this Philodendron, I want to say Spiritus Sancti, it's not. It's Paraiso Verde. This is one of the leaves. It had 1 more leaf that was small, just like this one. That leaf didn't make it because this plant arrived with 99% rotten root. It had this tiny bit left. I was absolutely sure that's not gonna make it because that was only part of the main root. There were no fine roots there, nothing. It was 1 node, 1 leaf with a bit of new growth, which was this leaf, which wasn't fully hardened off, and another one. And I really thought, it's dead, it's a goner. But I decided, of course, to attempt, and as you can see, we do have roots. And it did receive the same treatment of going into full perlite and cocoa coir, which I find to be a very, very good mix if you are attempting to root something. It can hold on to moisture well, but it is also well aerated. And typically things do not rot for me in this mix. I planted it, I put it into propagation box, and it survived. Now this is the new leaf it produced. It's not looking very sexy, but I think that's because it was in less light also in the propagation box. We will see now what the new leaf will bring us because it is on its way. That plant concludes this part of the video, and now we will move into a bit of a chit chat about buying and selling plants online. The reason I wanted to make this video is twofold, or multifold. First of all, I wanted to talk in this video as a buyer, and I wanted to talk to the rest of you who are buyers and what we should expect from the plants for the money that more often than not is very hard earned. Secondly, I wanted to talk to other sellers from the perspective of someone who occasionally sells plants to really discuss what should be the norm when you sell plants. A plant that I didn't show you from my variegated German shipment is this Philodendron Glorious. Now, I don't know if you can qualify this as a plant anymore, but it is certainly an object. I think we can still call it that. And as you can see, Jose Bueno no es bueno. It doesn't look very good, and this plant was much larger. This was a plant that was sold with 6 or 7 leaves if I'm not mistaken. And right out of the box, it had 3 leaves that were completely black, rotten, they were falling off. 1 hour or so after the unboxing, the other leaves started to fall off. Green leaves that appeared to be healthy, they would just peel off from the stem of the plant. I was left with 3 leaves, and very quickly one of those also fell off, and then for the longest time this plant had 2 leaves. And I have been trying to root this for well over a month, and as you can see, that task is not very successful. It's not going well, and I don't think it's gonna go well. I understand when we are in the business of selling plants, there are no guarantees exactly, at least not like with some other products, but I still believe that some things should be expected. And I also wanted to reflect a little bit on some practices that I have seen go around online, and I don't really like them. First of the things that I will see that sellers will often write is that they're not responsible for any damage during shipping or any loss.
Yeah, that's sad. Yeah. Okay. Let's unpack that.
When you sell a plant, there is so much that you can do when you pack it and when you send it to someone. Sometimes you can do a very good job packing and a plant can still arrive damaged. One of the examples is the Philodendron Splendid that I showed to you. That plant was packed perfectly, but for whatever reason, the top of the plant broke off and the leaves came shredded. I don't really know why. The plant was not sent in a condition like that, and the box did not arrive with any damages that you could visually see at least, but for whatever reason, that is the condition it arrived in. And I'm fine with that. As I said, I did write to the seller about this plant and I was offered a replacement plant. However, I refused because I do believe that this plant, even though it had some cosmetic damages, arrived in a good condition. The roots were okay and the plant was generally healthy. However, in the case of my Philodendron Hosebono that you just saw, that plant did not arrive well. It only spent 4 days in the box and it arrived with rotten leaves and with rotten roots. Since the temperatures are okay, I don't think we can really blame the temperatures on what happened in that box in the period of 4 days. And there were no actual physical damages on the plant that would indicate bad shipping. I don't think that was the culprit. I think there must have been some other reason why the plant rotted in the box in the period of 4 days. And so we can rule out that Philodendron Hosebono is a terrible shipper. I do have a Hosebono that spent 5 or 6 days in the box. And this is the condition of that plant. This plant is healthy, it already is pushing out a new leaf, and the roots are fine. So I don't think we can blame Philodendron Hosebono for what happened in the shipping. So who is to blame? Is it the buyer's responsibility that the plant rotted in the box, or is it the seller's? Leave the comment down below, I'm curious to find out. In my opinion, I do think something was wrong, not just with that plant, but with all the plants that arrived, because all of them arrived rotten. I don't really want to speculate. Is it the care that they received before? I'm not gonna go into that. I do have my theories, but I cannot prove any of them, so let's just not speculate here. But I do think that in this case, it is certainly not the buyer's responsibility. When I approached the seller about this particular shipment, I got a mixed response, and very quickly that got very sour. The response would vary from these plants need over 90% humidity, that is how I care for them, to, you know, sometimes people buy these rare plants and they don't really know how to take care of them. And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that putting the blame on the buyer? I do agree that that sometimes indeed happens. I see it all the time. However, I would never assume that if someone received a plant from me and it rotted in 3 days, that it was a person who did not know anything about plants. Out of all the plants that arrived in that box, I only complained about one, Philodendron Hosebono, because I was quite sure that I'm not going to be able to save that one. And Guess what? My assumption was not wrong. I was able to save the rest of them, even though they also did not have any roots and they also suffered from rot, but it was very clear to me that there is a much bigger issue with this philodendron. And I think that what I asked for was quite reasonable. What I said, if this philodendron fails, can we discuss a potential partial refund in, let's say, 2 weeks? Let's give it some time to see if something will happen. Well, I was blocked, and I think that means a no. And to be quite honest with you, I was very angry about it. If I recorded a video back then, you would hear a lot of foul language. You can ask some of my friends. I can get quite B-word. But let's get back to the topic here. In my opinion, it should never be buyer's responsibility. At least not all of it should be buyer's responsibility. In my opinion, it should be a shared risk. After all, if you as a seller do not have any buyers that will buy your plant online, who are you going to sell it to? You can say that you do not accept any risks, but what if all of us decided, okay, in that case, we are not going to buy from you? See what I mean? And there are some fantastic sellers out there. There are sellers that are genuinely concerned how the plant will arrive, and they will contact you when the plant arrives, mostly private sellers. And there are sellers that will contact you if a plant gets lost in the shipment. When I was ordering hoyas from Camilla last year, package got a bit lost in Germany. I really do not have a great experience with plants and Germany. She contacted me right away and asked what can we do to contact DHL. And in case of Philodendron Splendid, I just wanted to notify the seller because I think sometimes this type of feedback can be helpful. Maybe they will know in the future to further secure the plant in some way. I did not ask for a refund, but I was offered a replacement plant right away. And I do think that is a good business practice. What I dislike and what has happened several times is when I send photos to a seller of plants that have clearly suffered from rot or something similar in the box that was not just damaged during transit, and they ignored it. I would like to know your thoughts and your opinions on this. Do you think that the responsibility should be entirely on the seller, entirely on the buyer, or should it be a shared responsibility? As I said, I understand all the sides. You are buying plants, and plants are very sensitive. Sometimes they can tank in a box in 2 days, really. But there is no reason why a Philodendron Hosebono or some of the other philodendrons should arrive looking like that in only 4 days. Or if that is the case, I think the sellers should also notify the buyer that the plant does not ship well. At least that's what I do. Whenever someone buys a Hoya from me, I will tell them, this Hoya does not ship well. For example, Hoya elliptica. And even though they all always arrive in good condition, I do make sure to tell them that, and I do make sure to tell them that they can either ask for a refund or a second cutting if needed. This also brings me to the second point. A lot of the times I will see that sellers will write, do not unpot the plant upon arrival. Really? Let's say you purchase 4 or 5 plants like I did that were very expensive altogether, and they all arrive with rot, and you don't check the pots. You just leave them to rot nicely in those pots, hoping they will be fine. I'm going to share my experience with you. Each time I did not unpot a plant that arrived via mail and I suspected something was wrong, that plant would usually not make it. And then each time I received a plant in the mail and I suspected something was wrong and I checked the roots and took care of the situation immediately, the plant survived. And I do understand why sellers say this. Shipping is very stressful for plants. Unpotting plants, repotting plants is also a stressful process. But I also believe that we should be able to check the roots, not repot it. Sometimes you just want to take it out of the pot and check the roots. And that can be done without causing damage to the root system. And you will see right away what is going on. If there is any rot, if you should root the plant again, or if there are any pests, for example, root mealybugs. As you know, my Hoya subquintuplo nervus arrived with plethora of those, and I did not unpot it upon arrival, which not only caused me a lot of issues with that plant, it caused me a lot of issues with many many of my hoyas. And while you should really isolate any plant that you get, the reality is we usually live in small apartments and very small homes, and we don't have the space for that. Also, most of us do not have greenhouses, cabinets, tents, whatever, and still some sellers give the advice to put the plant in the greenhouse. For example, with my Jose Buono, the seller told me, don't put it in a box, don't put it in a bag, put it in a greenhouse. Specifically, greenhouse. Let me just go and purchase one quickly. So to recap this part, I do believe that some cosmetic damage is okay. That really can happen. The plants are in the box, they tumble around. Sometimes they think that the postman plays soccer with our boxes, or whatever sport there is. I'm not clearly very into sport. I mean, can you tell that I'm not into sports that much? But some conditions like rot, severe pest infestation, that is just simply not the responsibility of the buyer. Now, this isn't to say that plants cannot rot in the box. They surely can. But in my experience, they have to spend a long time in the box, well over a week. Of course, it depends from plant to plant, but in majority of cases, that is true. I will end this video here because I don't think there is enough time to go deeper into this topic, but I would love to hear your opinions. I would love to see them in the comments below, and perhaps in the future I can make another video that will simply talk about this, because I do think it is a topic that definitely needs to be discussed, and there are quite a few topics in the plant community that need to be discussed, but I think this is something we can tackle together here on this channel. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, you can do so below. It would truly mean a world to me. And don't forget to leave a comment. I would love to hear your opinions about this. Have a great weekend and good luck with recovering your plants. I really hope you don't have a lot to recover, and I will see you soon. Bye! I would like to take some time to thank my patrons. A massive shout out to my $5 patrons. One anonymous patron, Betsy Begonia, Bonnie Harris, Carrie Danube Daniels, Estelle, Houseplant Heather, Hoyas and Whatnots, Kelso, Kristen Sherwood, Mars B, Martina, Alif Perday, Melissa Walker, Nicole Ferranti, P.J., Rachel Colette Conroy, Robin L. Jennings, Stephanie H2O, Spinach Geek, Tanya, TJWO, Vicky Dingler, and Zlokobniponi. Also, a big thank you to my $3 patrons: Angelina Farnan, April Arroyo, Brianna Phillips, Catherine G, Claudia L, Jacinta, Jerry's Garden, Lisa Helling, Lori Murphy, Morgan Kennedy, Nikki, and Ringlov. And a thank you to my $1 patrons, Caroline and Tang Watanasriakul. Thank you all so much for incredible support. I truly miss talking about Hoyas in this video. I better go and pet some leaves now. Have a wonderful day and see you soon. Bye!